This is the best of Dr. Jerome Corsi on the Truth Central.
This is Dr. Jerome Corsi. Thank you for joining us on thetruthcentral.com. We're doing podcasts every weekday. And you can find me on X at CorsiJerome1. And you can find me at Substack at JeromeCorsiPhD.substack.com. Now, today we're going to do a deep dive into my book on the Kennedy assassination and a book I wrote earlier, which is Coup d'etat. Now, the final analysis, the assassination of John F. Kennedy, the final analysis is done extremely well. And Archbishop Vigano in Rome has written a new foreword to the book. It's here. We're going to be posting this foreword up on the Amazon listing, and we'll be doing a new edition of the book, which includes this foreword. It's extremely well done, but what the Archbishop is saying essentially is that this was a coup d'etat, and the book proves it was a coup d'etat conducted by the CIA on orders of the CIA. Kennedy was killed on the orders of the CIA, and he says that basically that this coup d'etat, which is what the assassination of John Kennedy was all about, was the deep state taking over the United States. And he compares it to the deep church taking over the Catholic Church with Pope John the 23rd and the Vatican II, which also occurred in the 1960s. And so what Archbishop Vigano is understanding is that all of this confronts us. He says the final analysis has the merit of directly confronting the reality of the coup d'etat that was perpetrated by the deep state through the assassination of President Kennedy, was considered an obstacle to the achievement of objectives that today we understand were achieved in any case, with or without the approval of the sovereign people. A coup that has led the institutions of the United States of America, not unlike those of other nations and of the Catholic Church herself, to be the unique and totalitarian expression of a subversive power that dangerously combines the individualistic interests of capital with the tyrannical methods of communist collectivism. This privatization of the state is mirrored in the chronic and irreversible indebtedness of the citizens who are called upon to pay the bankruptcy costs of the speculations of a very powerful international financial lobby. And it should not escape our notice that there is a parallel within the privatization of the Catholic Church, which is now been taken over by an elite no less subversive than that of the deep state, in which positions of power have been infiltrated by heretical and corrupt prelates who use the authority of Christ to guarantee obedience from the faithful. To me, it is clear to me, and this is the reason why, as Archbishop and former Apostolic Nuncio to the United States of America, I agreed to write this preface, that this coup necessarily had to avail itself of the ideological support and moral support of the Catholic Church, which otherwise would have represented an obstacle to the fulfillment of the project of the New World Order. This is why I believe that the events related to Kennedy's assassination should be read as part of one narrative together with those that led the Church of Rome to progressively become the spokesperson for the globalist plan, a plan on which some lobbies were working that today are leading to the dissolution of the social, moral, religious, cultural, and economic fabric of Western countries. It's a very powerful statement, and I'm going to illustrate in part one other dimension of this, not just the Catholic Church, but that the coup d'etat that occurred when John Kennedy was assassinated by the deep state, the CIA, military-industrial complex, with the complicity of the press, saying Lee Harvey Oswald was the lone gun assassin. All of this together, in the Department of Justice turning a blind eye, the Secret Service destroying evidence, and all of these together indicate a dark force that has taken over our institutions. And I'm going to make the point that's continuing. So I'm going to transition from the final analysis, a book I have just written that is currently a bestseller to a book I wrote a few years ago called Coup d'etat, which is exposing deep state treason and the plan to reelect Donald Trump. I wrote this book before the 2020 election, and I was aware that the move was going to be underway. I wrote it in 2020 before the election. I wrote it starting in 2019, published in 2020. And the whole idea here is that the coup d'etat is continuing, and it's now going into the open. Now, I want to read a couple of paragraphs from the introduction here that Doug Horn wrote, and explain a couple of points he's making in detail. He says the assassination has been likened. Doug Horn, by the way, was on the Assassinations Records Review Board. He became an expert in the medical evidence. He wrote 5 volumes on the medical evidence called Inside the ARRB, Inside the Assassinations Records Review Board. They're outstanding. Doug Horn said the assassination has been likened to a 500-piece jigsaw puzzle for which 250 pieces have been discarded, thrown away. The 250 new pieces substituted for the discarded pieces are intentionally fraudulent, designed to create a picture of what happened that is very different from the reality on Elm Street in Dealey Plaza. The end result has been a puzzle that does not come together at all and will not allow the student of the assassination to create any coherent picture of what happened on November 22nd, 1963, unless the fraudulent puzzle pieces have first been identified and then thrown out. I submit that only after the fraudulent pieces of the puzzle are removed can the missing pieces to the puzzle, that is, the real evidence that was suppressed, be rediscovered and the true picture reconstructed. He said, throughout my adult lifetime of research into the JFK assassination, I've come to understand that the fraud in the medical evidence that I'm discussing here includes the following. And he goes through all of the evidence that leads him to the conclusion that this was a coup d'etat. I'll read just a little bit of this. He says there were 4 sets of official conclusions about how JFK was killed, that is, about the wounds on his body, arrived at between November 22nd, 1963 and December 11th, 1963, and all were demonstrably incorrect. The fact that there are 4 official sets of conclusion within and about 2.5 weeks is the surest indicator that finding the truth was not an objective, rather determining what tale could be sold to the American people, consistent with the straitjacketed, very limited evidence acknowledged by the U.S. government, was all that mattered. The U.S. government has never acknowledged that in this case, but the evolving JFK autopsy conclusions can be factually demonstrated and have done so in Chapter 11 of Inside the Assassination Records Review Board, and a publicly delivered PowerPoint presentation entitled The Evolving JFK Autopsy Report. Okay, so the what is being laid out here by Doug Horn in the book, prefacing what we wrote here, is that the government has created a false narrative that can sell to the American people. It's like living in a Jim Carrey Truman Show, where what you're watching is not reality, but it is a movie, and it's being directed by the CIA that's supplying the script. Now, I want to go over to Coup d'etat, because this is a book that I wrote after I was involved in the Mueller investigation, and the Mueller investigation thought I had a tie to Julian Assange, and that I had shared that tie with Roger Stone, who shared it with Donald Trump, permitting the Trump campaign to influence how Assange released the stolen documents from the Democratic National Convention. Okay, now the book is really, I think, even more important than when it was first written, because what it shows is that Donald Trump's removal from office was a coup d'etat again. They didn't shoot him, they didn't kill him, but they had staged this entire coup d'etat of the Mueller investigation, and I was the last witness. I was the last witness because they believed I had this tie to Assange. And in August of 2016, I had taken a trip to Italy with my then wife and family to celebrate our 25th wedding anniversary. By the way, she recently divorced me after 32 years of marriage. She couldn't take the politics and the strain of the politics any longer. At least I believe I would have had to have retired had we remained married, and I was faithful to her. I believe God just took her out of my life, and I got back to work. That's why I wrote this book on the Kennedy assassination, which I probably never would have written had I been married to her again, or still.
This is the best of Dr. Jerome Corsi on the Truth Central.
So in the 2009 bestseller, Silent No More, I wrote how I became a political prisoner of this Mueller witch hunt. And I spent the time with the prosecutors in Washington, up to 40 hours in a room that was unmarked. The FBI would pick you up in an unmarked vehicle in the beginning of the day at our hotel, me and my attorney. They would drive us to an unmarked building, which is an FBI building in Washington, D.C. We would begin to be interviewed. The interview would go on probably all day long in a room with no windows. The FBI, when they didn't like what you were saying, would all get up and everybody leave the room, and my attorney would go talk to them. It was me against 4 prosecutors and 7 or 8 FBI, all sitting there across the table from us in a grilling. I did not have a source with Assange. And the information that I derived, I was almost precisely correct that Mueller would, that the Assange had Podesta's emails. That was the second batch he was going to drop. That was right. They were Podesta's emails, and I could predict what was in them. I could say that the emails contained that Hillary was suffering neurological problems, which made her subject to blackouts, and she was really having severe difficulty functioning, that she was a lousy candidate, it was not charismatic, and that together with the Perkins Coie firm and the campaign attorneys were mishandling campaign funds and violating campaign finance laws. All of this came out in the emails, plus much additional. The FBI was convinced I could not have known this unless I had a source. They finally said they were going to say I was lying to them. If I had a source, I wouldn't reveal it. I had to either take a plea deal and go for a little while to prison saying I had lied, or they put me in front of a jury in Washington, D.C. that would convict me of whatever they charged me with, and I would spend the rest of my life in prison. I told the Mueller investigation that they'd have to prepare to put me in prison because I could not stand before a judge and God and swear to a lie to keep myself out of prison. So after I refused to take the plea deal, on March 22nd, 2019, Attorney General William Barr notified the Congress that Special Counsel Robert Mueller had submitted the final report of his investigation. 2 days later, on March 24th, in a 4-page letter addressed to Congress, Barr summarized the conclusions. He said, number one, the special counsel's investigation do not find the Trump campaign or anyone associated with it conspired or coordinated with Russia in its efforts to influence the 2016 election. That's after 4 years of Russian collusion and FBI investigations and creating false narratives to sell to the American people, exactly as was done in the Kennedy assassination. The second conclusion was the special counsel did not draw a conclusion one way or another as to whether examined constituted obstruction of the investigation. But the key was there was no Russian collusion, despite the fact that Trump's treat was no collusion, no obstruction, complete and total exoneration, keep America great. And Barr's letter set off a firestorm. CNN and MSNBC began a daily drumbeat hyping every tidbit of new information, continuing to suggest that Trump had colluded with Russia. I was on the media in that time. I was examined and grilled by NBC, ABC, CBS, PBS, you name it. Everybody wanted to interview me. And I consistently said that I did not have a source, which was true. I did not have a source. And I continually tried to expose how it was the government that was lying. Now, I want to give you a couple pieces of information that I think are critical to see how these tie together. Because you have a deep state covert act creating the Steel Dossier in order to create evidence, supposed evidence, of Trump colluding with Russia. Now, this dossier itself has been completely discredited. And if I point to a couple of points on this, one is number one, on page 29, I point out Christopher Steele, who is the author of the report, had covert ties to the U.S. agencies. So on page 29, I'm saying, to understand the role that Christopher Steele played in the attempted coup d'etat, it is important to note a few key points about his background. Steele, a 26-year-old married man, landed in Moscow in 1990 to work as an M16 British intelligence spy operating under this thin diplomatic cover. Russian intelligence KGB unit evidently was on to Steele as a British spy from the beginning. Despite this, Steele had remarkable longevity in Moscow. He managed to stay in Moscow throughout the days of General Secretary Mikhail Gorbachev's attempted perestroika and glasnost reforms, coming to terms with the West. The Soviet coup d'etat against Gorbachev failed in August 1991, and he was there through the fall of the Berlin Wall in November 1991, and through the beginning of Boris Yeltsin's first term as president of the newly founded Russian Federation. So back in London in 1993, Steele advanced within M16 to the point where he held a position on M16's Russian desk. Okay, so Steele is a operative. He's a spy. And he eventually becomes very involved with U.S. connections. Hillary Clinton, so basically, after suffering a personal tragedy of his first wife's death in 2019 from cirrhosis of the liver, Steele, then 43 years old, left M16 to establish Orbis Business Intelligence Ltd. in London. So around this time, another guy named Simpson was leaving a Wall Street firm, and as Steele was leaving M16, the two met in London, and they formed Fusion GPS and Orbis. Simpson and Steele knew and shared some of the people with expertise in Russia, and they got tied in with U.S. intelligence. And Hillary Clinton essentially hired this former spy, Steele, to use his contacts in Russia to conduct opposition research on Donald Trump, her political opponent in 2016. So she hired this Fusion GPS and Orbis. Orbis became a subcontractor of Fusion GPS, and the two worked together to produce evidence of Donald Trump's collusion with Russia. Okay, now, Steele is also back-channeling into the Department of Justice. On 2019, Steele admitted under a deposition taken in London that in developing the Trump dossier, he used unverified reports he pulled from CNN's iReport website, unaware the submissions on that website were made by members of the public and not checked for accuracy. Okay, so Steele leaks the dossier, and essentially in a London deposition, Steele admitted that when the Trump dossier was finished, he provided a copy to journalists in order to make it public, so that the information in Trump's candidacy, which was harmful in that dossier, would get repeated by the press. Steele leaked to Michael Isikoff the chief investigator for Yahoo News, was particularly damaging. On September 23, 2016, Isikoff published an article entitled U.S. Intel Officials Probe Ties Between Trump and Kremlin. Isikoff's article reported that U.S. intelligence officials were seeking to determine if Carter Page, an American businessman identified by Trump as one of his foreign policy advisors, had opened up private communications with senior Russian officials about the possibility of lifting economic sanctions if the Republican nominee became president. Okay, so now what you've got is a former spy with ties to M16 forming his own private intelligence agency, hired by the Clintons to develop information that's hostile or detrimental to Donald Trump. He does so. He uses unverified sources, which he admits, and he leaks the document to Michael Isikoff, who is an extreme leftist. Michael Isikoff interviewed me a couple times. And Steele also leaked the dossier to John McCain, Senator John McCain, who was happy to seize upon it. And McCain had his staff pore over this dossier. And now he's got the dossier in the hands not only of the press, but in the hands of McCain, who is not a Trump supporter. And the dossier has no basis in verified facts. It has things about the famous, peeing incident where Trump was supposedly hired prostitutes in Moscow, and they did a pee ceremony on him naked, etc., etc. Okay, now, fundamental understanding how the FBI dealt with this case is to understand that the FBI had counterintelligence powers. Now, the FBI was CIA is supposed to not operate in domestic politics, and the FBI is not supposed to operate in international spying activities. But because various laws criminalized the activities of, commit crimes, U.S. crimes in espionage activities, the FBI developed counterintelligence division as opposed to the criminal division. And the CIA, under the FISA law, was able to get FISA court approval to do NSA spying on Americans who they believed were involved in international espionage. So both powers now are crossing over into the other's field, which means that internationally, the CIA are working with the FBI against American citizens. These are enormous powers. And if the law enforcement is politically corrupted, then it's going to be used to politicize justice. And that's what happened in this case. And how it became a coup d'etat was the CIA at the highest levels, together with the FBI at the highest levels, decided that they were going to make sure that Trump did not become president in 2016. That failed. Then they wanted to make sure that they could oust Trump. They were seeking to impeach Trump if they could find the key in Russian collusion. And why I'm pivotal to both of these is I've co-authored with Dr. Mantic the book on JFK, which shows how the government operated there to create a lying narrative to cover a coup d'etat. And here I'm doing the same with Donald Trump, showing how the lying CIA, together with the lying FBI and Department of Justice, created a false narrative to defeat Donald Trump, to impeach him, to remove him from office, and to make sure he would never run again for president. Now, the key element of entering the Steel Dossier into the FBI, which triggered the opening of this international operation of counterintelligence, was that Christopher Steele, who wrote the dossier, and Glenn Simpson, who assisted him, they both had ties to the Clinton campaign and to journalists known to be Clinton partisans. And so their goal was to get before the American public the narrative that Trump had been working with Russia to steal the 2016 election from Clinton. And given their blind determination that Clinton was the heir apparent to the 2016 presidency, those working on the Clinton campaign had confidence the public would accept the narrative the mainstream media fed them, whether it was true or not. So Bruce Orr, senior officer within Obama's Department of Justice, admitted that he and Steele first met in 2007 while Steele was still with British intelligence MI6, I'm sorry. Orr had traveled to London to speak with the British government officials about Russian organized crime, and the U.S. office in London set up the meeting. Orr saw Steele in 2008 at an international conference in London on the subject of Russian organized crime. They stayed in touch. Bruce Orr and his wife Nellie played a major role in the Department of Justice's clandestine involvement in the Steel Dossier. So until Orr's multiple secret meetings with Steele in 2016 became public knowledge in 2017, Orr did his best to remain silent about the role he played in promoting the Steel Dossier to the FBI and the Department of Justice. But we now know that Orr parlayed his experience within the Department of Justice to get this document before the top management of the Department of Justice. You have also Victoria Nuland involved in this. Victoria Nuland is the State Department official who's been determined to push NATO to the edge of Russia, getting Finland, Sweden, and Ukraine to join into NATO. She's been particularly active in Ukraine. Okay, see, the Victoria Nuland was the Assistant Secretary of State in 2016 for Eurasian Affairs. She became a Clinton loyalist. She served as the principal foreign policy advisor to President Dick Cheney. And again, she was an operative for the State Department. The State Department has been advancing goals that are the State Department's goals, not necessarily the goals of the president. Nuland's married to Robert Kagan, a foreign policy expert who is a senior fellow at the Brookings Institute and a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. So they're globalists. Okay, Kagan disassociated himself from the GOP and became a Clinton supporter in 2016. In reaction to the political rise of Donald Trump, we characterize as a Frankensteinian monster and compared to Napoleon for his embrace of nationalism. Kagan supported Hillary Clinton for president in 2016. He celebrated his change of allegiance in an opinion piece he wrote in the Washington Post in which he characterized Donald Trump as a fascist. Okay, so what happens is Steele cozies up to Orr. Orr's wife happens to be an expert on Russia. They plant this dossier with Orr, and Orr brings it in to the top echelon of the Department of Justice, and they say, here's evidence that, in fact, we've got Donald Trump colluding with Russia. And here's, in fact, how Donald Trump was co-opted by Russia, and he's now doing Russia's bidding. The counterintelligence operation that was set up by the Department of Justice moved various Department of Justice officials and FBI officials to start operating in Europe to get Hillary Clinton its goals advanced of establishing a tie a tie together that would defeat Donald Trump, a tie between Russia and Trump of collusion, which was the heart of this lying Steel Dossier. Okay, now I want to cover one or two more points on this, and then I want to kind of come to a conclusion here. But as this detailed process worked through, there are two major parts of the setup. One is that when the emails are stolen from from the Democratic National Committee in 2016. The Democrats organized a cybersecurity firm that was controlled by the Democrats to produce a report that said that there are signs that Russia stole the emails. And this was done through a certain identification of a metacode in the emails that were stolen. And it was all a lie. There was an article published as well in the Nation of all places, and I met some people involved in that article that demonstrated that in the time sequences with which the emails were stolen, they could not have been a hack. It had to have been an inside job. But yet the intelligence agency chiefs all came out with a report that said Russia stole the emails. So when I was before the Mueller team, and I said, wait a minute, I've gotten a lot of information about how the Democrats put their computer system together. I had a source that was an inside source, which I revealed to the FBI, and said that the email servers were not on a campaign server. They were on an internal server that the DNC used for conducting email traffic. And that Podesta had been extremely sloppy with his passwords. He actually left them on the desk of his secretary and open to be seen so she could open his emails and read them. That intelligence report became key to establishing the Russian collusion, and it was Brennan and the head of the NSA. All these top intelligence heads said that Russia stole the emails, and that Trump had somehow or other arranged to work with Assange to get the emails and to use them against Donald Trump. Now, the FBI, in trying to make this case, used foreign operatives, people like Stephen Helper, who were running international institutes in London or in Rome. And they went after Carter Page and they went after Papadopoulos, who were two minor Trump campaign officials who played minor roles and were unsophisticated in international politics. And they were set up in these conversations by these operatives in Europe working with the CIA to suggest that Trump had and knew about the emails well before they were released. Again, the FBI, having spent time with them, these 40 hours in these intense grillings, were absolutely, there were certain assumptions they made that you couldn't challenge. You couldn't challenge that the Russians did not steal the emails. There was an inside job from within the Democratic National Committee. You couldn't challenge that, in fact, that Assange was given the emails and Assange had published the emails, but Assange had not coordinated with Donald Trump to release the emails in a manner to hurt Donald Trump, or hurt Hillary Clinton. Now, Assange himself denied involvement of the Russians in thieving and stealing the emails. In fact, he strongly suggested that it was Democratic operative Seth Rich who stole the emails and got them to the Russians. Got them to Assange, not the Russians. So on a Dutch television, August 9th, 2016, Assange was asked, the stuff that you're sitting on is an October surprise in there? And Assange said, WikiLeaks never sits on material. Okay, he said essentially that whistleblowers go to significant efforts to get us material and often take very significant risks. There's a 27-year-old who works for the DNC that was shot in the back and murdered just a few weeks ago and for unknown reasons as he was walking down the streets in Washington. Okay, so the interviewer said, was the basis of Rich murder's robbery? And Assange said, there's no findings. And the interviewer said, what are you suggesting? He said, I'm suggesting that our sources take risks. They become concerned to see things occurring like that. So in other words, Assange was suggesting he got the emails from Seth Rich. Now, to tie this all together, what it makes it clear is that the FBI and the CIA are no longer respecting their original charters. They're free to go anywhere in the world they want, or the CIA is free to spy on Americans. Certainly, they collect all the data. So, well, we don't look at the data unless it's relevant to one of our FISA warrants. Well, why are they collecting the data in the first place? Why do they have the data of every keystroke taken in the United States, every telephone call made in the United States? Massive data banks. Snowden has warned us of this. Why is this data being collected? And secondly, this creation of narratives, this creation of false realities and lying. The crowdsource was a legitimate cybersecurity firm, not with ties to the Democrats. Well, it had ties to the Democrats. Okay, that the Russians hacked the emails. Well, there's no definitive proof Russia hacked the emails. In fact, it was very strongly suggested that it was Seth Rich. But this story was sold to the American people, and even today in Congress, there are congressmen who will make speeches suggesting that Trump is in collusion with the Russians. Now, what is shocking about this book, and I tie the coup d'etat to a small group around Obama, Valerie Jarrett and others, who were influencing Obama and carrying out his acts, and the entire, I believe, Russian collusion investigation, which was concocted by Hillary Clinton to cover up her private email server that she had while she was Secretary of State, and was actually conducting Clinton Foundation business through her private email server to get people to contribute to the Clinton Foundation because she was Secretary of State in order to buy policy favors. This corruption is massive. And if Obama is still in Washington, and we've got Joe Biden as president, who is, according to the special prosecutor, so mentally suffering from mental dementia that he can't be indicted for misusing classified documents, the deep state has exactly what they want. A president who's a complete figurehead, in fact, whose mental dementia may not even permit him to know day-to-day what he's doing, will read any document put in front of him. And if we have a government that is not being run by we the people, but is being run by deep state operatives who are hostile to America, and I've argued this about Obama in my book, The Abomination, in 2008, that Obama was raised in Islam, that Obama believes the United States is a racist country, and his fundamental transformation of America was to make us into a neo-Marxist state and advance this woke agenda, which Obama started by picking up on any incident in which a police were interacting with a black male, and it was to the black male's detriment, perhaps got killed. And then the Department of Justice with Eric Holder would rush in and demonize the police. Again, a careful, planned attack on the United States by not only a deep state, but a counter state. And I point out in my book on the truth about neo-Marxism, cultural Maoism, and anarchy, that the left and Mao created a counter state in order to be in control of the bureaucracy and take actions that will defeat Donald Trump and get him out of the presidency and block his ability to do effective executive action of any kind. And so I think one of the strategies of the deep state, if Trump should happen to win in the 2024 election, will be, again, to block him. Right now, they're passing a huge number of regulations to get them on the books before Donald Trump takes office, should he happen to take office. And they intend to resist him through the bureaucratic agencies of the deep state with enormous powers in the CIA and the FBI to create narratives that are lying narratives, to have them propagated by the mainstream media press, to have people believe them unconsciously through psychological operations, and to manipulate us into the loss of our freedoms. It's an agenda that's advancing. I'm hopeful today because I think people can see, especially now realizing the Kennedy assassination, There were multiple shooters. Kennedy, the x-rays are CSI, forensic evidence. Kennedy was shot twice from the front. We now know the Russian collusion hoax was a lie. We can begin to ask additional questions. In 9/11, why did buildings that were not hit by the airplanes go down? Where were the weapons of mass destruction in the Iraq War in 1991 that Colin Powell promised we would find that Saddam Hussein had? He didn't appear to have them. Lies, lies, lies. Now, we're going to be faced with a great test here in the next few years as to whether or not we can retain our freedoms. And probably the way to bet is not, that we'll probably lose them. But I believe that in the spirit of, we're going to get a judgment of God, by spirit of 2 Chronicles 7:14, if we get down on our knees and pray, God will hear our prayer and heal our land. And it's going to take an intervention by God at this point, not to have a nuclear war. With these demons creating war in the Middle East, on their narratives there, their narratives in Ukraine, us supporting Hamas with the Clinton administration starting out, moving that direction. Obama is much stronger in support of Iran, and Biden doing everything they can to appease Iran, returning money to them, giving them the means to fund terrorism. And we're getting false narratives created again today. The narratives of the crimes that Trump is being charged with. We're seeing lawfare in the open. We're seeing these trials against Trump based upon habitual liars like Michael Cohen. The American public are beginning to see through this. And as the economy continues to falter, as we continue to have the destruction of the middle class and the destruction of the dollar, I think these demons, and I believe satanic demons, who are intending to destroy the United States and are taking active steps to destroy the United States. It's not accidental. They're conducting a plan that's continuing in the coup d'etat that began with Jack Kennedy's death, perhaps even earlier. I'm going to look at Pearl Harbor eventually, if I get to write a book on that, showing how FDR baited the Japanese into attacking us to get into World War II. Another long story. But the bottom line here is that it's a spiritual war. And that's why I'm so pleased to have Archbishop Vigano's support. This is a moral battle. And it's one that we will lose our souls if we lose the battle. So I want to end in this spirit of 2 Chronicles 7:14. If we get on our knees and repent, God will hear our prayer and heal our land. I was able to not get indicted under the Mueller investigation and know in detail how that narrative was constructed, which I'm telling you and explaining to you in coup d'etat. Once we see how the government operates, lying, creating the psychological operations, the government's not going to be as effective as it was because their game is now in the open. The curtain has been pulled and we see the wizard standing there. I encourage people to read these books, to think about these issues, and not to be fooled by narratives, by hip-hop, TikTok, or other lying narratives that you hear daily in the White House press room. I was denied press credentials, even under Trump. The press does not want the truth. And my books are all about the truth about energy, global warming, and climate change, the truth about neo-Marxism, cultural Maoism, and anarchy. The truth is critical to setting us free. In the end, God wins. God is going to win here. God did not create the human race to be a failure. And we could go through an extremely harsh judgment of God, which I see could include a nuclear war. And I hope and pray I'm wrong. If enough of us repent, I think God will intervene and we will be spared the worst that could possibly happen. I don't think this is the extinction of the human race, although I think the demons who are behind this woke agenda, who are behind the creation of this World Economic Forum with the oligarchs and their bankers and their masters of multinational corporations coveting all the world's resources for themselves and their machines, I don't believe that dark reality will be fully created before it collapses under its own inconsistencies, its own lack of belief in God, and its own intention to depopulate the world. This is Dr. Jerome Corsi. Thank you for joining us. thetruthcentral.com. We will be back tomorrow with another podcast. God bless.
This is the best of Dr. Jerome Corsi on The Truth Central.